Hello, everybody, and welcome to What Happened to America. My name is Garrett Allen, and this is a Cause for Concern production. Okay, so today's July 14th, 2026, and Donald Trump will be addressing the nation. A few short hours, he will be getting to the dais and he will be speaking. And there is reporting that he's going to be speaking about John Ossoff and I think Raphael Warnock down in Georgia to talk about how their sitting senators are not legitimate and looking to probably oust them. This will not be the last time this happens. And this is not the first time this has happened. Donald Trump has been talking about the illegal elections and the rest of this garbage that's been going on since 2016. Oddly enough, there was nothing wrong with the elections prior to that when he was not in office. But neither here nor there, Donald Trump will be speaking about this, and we can expect more of this reporting garbage up until the election in the midterms. Now, this has happened to every fascist country. Every country that has had a fascist authoritarian takeover has experienced this. This is 101 fascism. It happened in Hungary, and we'll get into that. But right now, be prepared because this is going to be a new chapter and a new beginning tonight. If this is as reporting states, and Donald Trump will announce this officially, you can probably guess or bet that he will have some nefarious information that he has, because he stated that he has evidence. He has evidence that the 2020 election was stolen and he was in office and wait a minute, hold on. This is not right. But listen, people are going to believe it. 30% of this country that are MAGA will believe it. The other percentage in the middle, the independents, they may actually believe some of this as well, but they're starting to peel off. Maybe it's too late though, because listen, many people out there don't want to hear this. We are in the midst of a fascist takeover here in the United States, and people do not want to believe it. It's like being sick with a dramatic disease like cancer. At first you start feeling some symptoms and you're like, you know what, it's probably nothing. And you start convincing yourself because it's too hard to deal with, rightfully so. And you start telling yourself, nah, it's just a cold, or no, you know what, I'm feeling these aches and pains, maybe I'm getting older. And then surely, as time goes on, those symptoms get worse and they start piling up. And then all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you're like, you know what? Shit, it's time to go to the doctor. It's time to get some treatment. Now, the question is, how far are we along in that disease? Your guess is as good as mine, but I can honestly say, from my standpoint, the midterms are going to be the turning point of this entire thing. We will either, maybe both, we will devolve into complete fascism, meaning he will take over. He will take over the voting. He will try to fight to disqualify, throw out members of Congress, and take control of both the Senate and the House in any way necessary. There's a reason for that, and it makes sense if you think about it. The reason is simple. Donald Trump has done so many illegal things since 2016. He knows and understands that unless he stays in power, as all authoritarians do, that he will be put in jail. Justice always comes for them. And that's part of the dichotomy. Is fascism requires somebody who is willing to go out on that ledge, an authoritarian that is willing to do all sorts of illegal things. Now, it's the last thing I'll say on this before we get to the show, but we are now living in a country where a sitting president and administration, and the administration behind him, and the apathetic Congress are watching as Americans get shot, as Americans are bullied on the streets, as Americans are said to fear the military presence, the paramilitary presence. ICE is not a military presence. It is a paramilitary presence that has been given the authority by Donald Trump, by Tom Homan, and whoever else is supporting this regime to go out on the streets and, under the guise of immigration, get rid of minorities from this country. They want thousands to disappear per day. They have built prisons around the United States. Let me say that again. They have built prisons around this United States, and they are sending shock troops out to states, mostly blue states, because we realize that those blue states, if we remove those voters, not the illegal voters, immigrants who are legal immigrants here, and we scare them enough, they will not vote. And if their recourse is mail-in voting, well, they've got that covered too, because they're trying to push that end and get rid of mail-in voting as well. Starting to sense that? Listen, the argument is not immigration, although it seems to be. When we are shooting people on the streets of the United States, and we are arguing that the argument and the nexus for all this conversation is that people are illegal and they're coming into the country illegal, you're missing the point. Humanity. They're shooting people on U.S. soil. Before Donald Trump, that would never have been accepted. I can't remember, and neither can you, a time when it was acceptable to shoot people in the United States and come up with the ridiculous argument, well, you know what, they were in the country illegally, or they were trying to run over the officers with their cars. And you would at least look at that and say, you know what, I don't see the evidence that they were trying to run them over. But 30 to 40% of this country is willing to believe that. And you know what, shame on you, because even if you believe that these people are here illegally, even if you believe they tried to run them over, your side, if it was somebody else on the other side, would be asking for evidence. But you're willing to accept that without evidence. I won't use the cult word because it's a little overplayed. Listen, we are losing the morality of this country. We are losing love and respect for this country. And you can say it's patriotism to go out there and wave the flag and nationalism and hurrah, hurrah for the troops over in Iran and down to bomb Iran like it was in the 1980s under Reagan, and many administrations talking about the evil Muslims and all this garbage. Next, it was the Haitians and then the Africans and all the garbage that's out there they hate. You could say that's normal because it's been going on for so long, but we're starting to accept it. And I don't want to live in that country. I'm a Army combat veteran. I did my time in my 20s, and this is not the military I know. And this is not, ICE is not the military. We have ICE, which will be deployed around the United States during the midterms. If that doesn't work, to push people from not voting, they will move their other militia, the Oath Keepers, and all those groups, those racist groups. Because let me explain something to you. Those groups are Christian white nationalists. And it would not shock me if many of them have infiltrated ICE. Because at its heart, this ICE project is racist. The last thing I'll say is it starts with the immigrants, the savages, as it has in Rome. Then it goes to the socialists and the communists, as it did in Germany after the burning of the Reichstag in 1933. Then it goes to the gays, the LGBTQ, the DEI. They're taking over your country. Make America great. Make Germany great. Make Rome great. Whatever one you want to talk about, because it's the same thing. The fascist movement is here, boys and girls. It is here. It is well and alive. And after the show, after this brief intermission, I'm going to tell you how we got here. And I'm going to give you the structure and the timeline from the 1940s all the way to now. This is not a new movement. but it's finally seeing its payday. See you guys after the break. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to What Happened to America. This is Gary Allen again, and I'm going to tell you the story and talk about the timeline of how we got here, in 2026 with this autocratic fascist takeover, Donald Trump on the precipice of the midterms, and in a couple of years from now, we'll see whether there's an election for president and how fair and how real it is. But this didn't start today. We're going to cover some modern history. This playbook goes all the way back in time. Many empires have tried this fascist takeover. Many leaders have, and some successful, some not. But Donald Trump, in all accounts, is successful right now. So we should stop this conversation with the media where they say his unsuccessful presidency. His presidency is usually successful. It may not be successful for me and you out there, but it is successful in his goal, which is a fascist takeover, and it is happening at a dramatic pace. So, the history. Off to the history. Let's start with the Heritage Foundation. In 1973, Paul Weyrich, Joseph Coors, and Edward Fulner started the Heritage Foundation. It was meant to be a conservative think tank that was quickly turned into a far-right think tank. And so the Heritage Foundation pops up on the screen, and it's not the first time these thoughts or these ideologies have come into play, but it's brought by a guy in Paul Weyrich who is a far-right conservative activist, also a Christian who believes in Christian values and is there is going to be a hint that right away this is going to be a far-right movement. Now, they start this organization, and it has an address. It is in Washington, D.C. It's a building. It has employees, and it has grown since. I think the last number was $39 million goes into it yearly, and it's an umbrella organization that has local chapters, local committees, and local, just people working on the state level taking over. So this has been going on. It's built up over time. They are, of course, the authors of Project 2025. The name of that is a mandate for conservative leadership, and it is meant to install a conservative government, and that conservative government is meant to bring about conservative values and Christian values, one and the same. Now, Paul Weyrich does this, but Paul Weyrich is not new on the scene. This is not his first go at this, and he's been around for quite some time, and he's taking the philosophies, the ideologies of people of the past. As a matter of fact, this sort of conservative, far right-leaning strategy ideology goes all the way back to the Bircher Society. The Bircher Society in the 50s were known as a bunch of radical lunatics. They weren't allowed near the halls of power. And although many of them tried to get into government, it didn't quite work for them. Because even then, they knew this kind of stuff was not the kind of stuff that should be in government. In the 1950s, say what you want about some of the issues like civil rights, and the extreme views of the 50s, there was still a moral sense to what the country was. And like I said, it's hard to square it up when there's still rampant racism in the country. But I think for the most part, people did not want to dismantle the government. Now, you can argue whether it should have been dismantled because of the civil rights violations and all that stuff. And I don't know if I would disagree with you, but that's not the case. So in the 50s, this radical group, the Bircher Society, people that were very much ethnic Christian nationalists, fight against the communist scare. They were anti-communist. They wanted big defense spending, and they bought into the boogeyman of the socialists and the communists. And they also had extreme views, racist views, anti-Semitism, racism, stuff like that. that it carried with it and carried all the way through to the Weyrich age and era. As a matter of fact, Paul Weyrich then coined a term with Gary Falwell, who was the televangelist, the evangelical Christian preacher that was on the airwaves everywhere, amongst others. The modern version, maybe somebody like Joel Osteen. Maybe he's a little cleaner and more polished. But Gary Falwell was the guy and Paul Weyrich that came up with the term the moral majority. Now, it's important to look at this because there's a connection between the earlier foundations and this phrase, the moral majority. It is meant to delineate a group or a voter bloc. And voter blocs wield great power and finance within Congress and Senate, and eventually into getting presidents elected. So the moral majority is meant to sort of mobilize this evangelical Christian / Catholic group. They want their ideas heard, and they want society to be more leaning towards a Christian society, to break down the walls of church and state. And that's the idea. But here's the thing. Obviously, Christians and Catholics, specifically the evangelicals, don't necessarily get along. So they struggle a little bit, but they come together in spite of this to understand that they sort of have a common goal and a common enemy. That common enemy is liberal ideology, Antifa, now it's Antifa, and the LGBTQ community, which is seen as anti-family, anti-Christian. Now, I'm mentioning this because we've got to go back in history now to sort of find out where this movement came from that's so strong in the late 70s that it actually gets Reagan elected. We'll get back to that, but I want to go backwards in time and realize that this is not a new idea. So, during World War II, the Arrow and Cross Party was an anti-communist party, and they had a strong presence over in Hungary. And some of you will think of Hungary and immediately go to Viktor Orban and the far-right takeover or fascist takeover of Hungary. Important to recognize that. But even before that, this Arrow and Cross Party murdered Jews and liberals in Hungary, slaughtered. And this group survives quite some time. And there was a gentleman in that group, his name is Laszlo Pastor. And Laszlo Pastor is part of this Arrow Cross Party. And then sort of moving up to modern times, Laszlo Pastor is this guy that is put in jail in Hungary because he's part of this Arrow Cross Party and his ideas. And so fast forward, he emigrates to the United States. And he doesn't immediately go to befriend and consult Paul Weyrich. He is part of something earlier that many people don't talk about. He is part of, again, consolidating a group. And this group is consolidated to get Nixon into power. So now we're getting back to Nixon. This is an earlier thread to all of this. So Laszlo Pastor has the idea to consolidate this ethnic group, the blue-collar workers ethnic group that is basically all the Eurocentric people in the United States, the blue-collar workers, all these people, except for, you guessed it, the Jews and the African Americans. So now we have what's called us and them, or the others, and this idea of white America. White America with exception to Jews and to African Americans. Now, this is so successful that Nixon wins in a landslide. He also has very extreme anti-communist rhetoric, and he believes in strong defense and all this stuff that policy-wise works for a lot of these conservatives, which is a big tent group, which has this whole thing going on. And it's always been, quote unquote, the big tent party, but it's always the big tent party for the Christian whites. Anyway, Nixon gets into office. Yeah, obviously, we all know the history. Nixon is out of office, but many conservative people believe that Nixon is, it's a raw deal. Everybody does this. So what? He's the only one. He just got caught, and so the conservatives are sort of sore about this. Now, there's a lot of history in the Nixon thing, but let's not get hung up on that. Let's just realize that the thread is from the Bircher Society and from World War II and these Nazis. And this guy Pasteur comes over here and sort of brings some of those ideas with him and keeps it alive. Not that there weren't people in the United States that were keeping that alive. And we'll get into that in my book, hopefully in 2027, if we haven't taken that freedom away to speak our beliefs or to write our beliefs. My book will be coming out, which follows this idea all the way back, the through line, starting with the colonies and why the questions we never answered at the signing of the Constitution and the effective making of the United States, we never had a chance. And it was always going to lead in this direction. Anyway, we are now at the point where this group with this guy, Paul Weyrich, and the Heritage Foundation has Laszlo Pasteur involved after his success with Nixon. So he pulls together this working group, this group of the white Christians, the white working class, the whites, not the Jews and the African Americans. Keep those in their side. So he creates this us and them thing. And that us and them thing strongly leads to this fascist ideology that the African Americans are lazy and we're hard workers, and the Jews are smart and they're crafty and they own all the banks and they own Hollywood and they're producing their ideology in movies and so they control all this stuff. So this us and them thing starts seeping in during the Reagan administration as well. And it's been there for a while, but this is the Reagan Revolution. Important to state right now that in the 1980s, Reagan, when he was campaigning before his presidency, he spoke to the evangelical Christians. And they latched onto him because he was a great speaker for them. And he pressed the idea of Christianity because he was an evangelical Christian. And he had this idea that he was sort of one of them. He was going to lead and be successful for them. And he was. Paul Weyrich, Laszlo Pasteur, in the Heritage Foundation. And Laszlo is not an official member of the Heritage Foundation, but he's a consultant to Weyrich. They come up with a playbook, and you guessed it, it is called The Mandate for Conservative Leadership. This is in 1980. And this Mandate for Leadership is a playbook on how to get conservative leadership into the government and get a more Christian conservative ideology in the United States. To get it back, to get rid of the liberals, to counteract the New Deal of FDR. So there are some 2,000 policy pieces that the Heritage Foundation comes up with, and somewhere between 60 and 80% of that is put in play. Hugely successful during the Reagan administration. It's so successful that the national debt triples because they're spending all this money on national defense. But what they've done, and what Reagan has done effectively, is deregulated, latched on to the big corporations for their money and their power, and supported them by cutting their taxes. You've heard this before, right? Cut their taxes, that the middle class and the little man are now paying the bulk of the taxes, and there's not enough tax revenue. So now all of a sudden we're tripling the deficit, the largest increase in national debt ever in the United States at the time. Well, the Reagan Revolution is successful at certain things, and it's not successful at certain things. It does strengthen national defense. It does push the idea of Christianity. It does push for prayer in schools. It does push for a breakdown of the wall that separates church and state. It does bring conservatism back and the family values back and the war on drugs. Because the war on drugs is a push to, wait a minute, it's them over there. They're the ones that are selling the drugs. It's the African Americans in the slums and the cities. Today it's the Haitians, right? You seeing what they're doing here? It's the same thing. So Reagan does this, and sometimes things that look good, like the war on drugs, they're talking points and arguments for the right, but at the same time they're talking at the other side of their mouth. Go, hey, we're fighting the war on drugs, but look at those drug dealers over there. We need to incarcerate them and throw them in jail. So the jail population goes up too under the three-strike rule, under Reagan's war on drugs, and now here we are. We're starting that divide more and more. Okay, there's Reagan in a nutshell. There's more to tell about that, but after Reagan, there's a little bit of quiet time, a little downtime. Clinton has some success, and then along comes what is the inevitable, which is finally they find somebody who has so little pride in himself, lacking in morals, that he will say and do anything. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump was a liberal. He was back in the day. He's friends with Clinton. Not that Clinton was too much of a liberal, but anyway, Trump comes on the scene, and now we're in a place. Now we're in a place where Project 2025 comes through. Now, let's understand one thing. During 2016, Donald Trump's election has success, and there's a lot of questions whether the Russians were interfered, and there's a lot of evidence that the Russians interfered, and there is an active campaign to make sure people, the conservatives and the Republicans, don't want that, so they push back and say, you know what, this is all legitimate and blah blah blah, and the right says election interference. It's them that's interfering, and we're still fighting that battle because in order to justify what is happening right now, they have to legitimize their presidency, their administration, and their movement. And they're now latched on to an us and them narrative that is ripping this country apart. You either believe the election was stolen and you are a Christian white nationalist who wants Christian values in schools, who wants the education department ripped apart because they're corrupt and that money's going all over the place, which is the narrative. And you believe in strong family values, which doesn't involve any gays or any of those people. Or even worse yet, according to them, is the African American, single dad myths, family breakup and drugs. And meanwhile, they're jailing them and ripping families apart. But they don't want to tell you that. So that's part of this too. So you're either that side or you're people that are on the other side that just want to live with respect for people and stop this nonsense where we're arguing every day. Now, there are some problems with liberal and progressive agendas. I wasn't a big fan of the Me Too movement. I understand the value of it, but I feel like it set people in the wrong way. Using pronouns sort of became a flashpot for this idea of free speech, and now it's given given a lot of credibility to the free speech fight, which is being taken to the extreme, saying Nazis should be able to speak their mind. Anyway, now we're in 2026, and let me finish with this, and we can move on. We are now in the midst of a fascist takeover. This is the final chapter in a book that has been going on in modern history, at least, back to the America First Committee in World War II. As I said, through the Berkshire Society, it is the playbook of the Hungarians, in which Viktor Orban has his hooks or had his hooks in the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party has learned from Viktor Orban over in Hungary and how they did it, right down to the capture of the courts, the Supreme Court issues, the election monitoring and election fiasco. All of it is part of that. Then it moves on to the Berkshire Society, and these are the people that are involved now. The next show, I'll tell you about a guy named Doug Wilson, Paula White. Doug Wilson is, he is self-identified as one of the others. Maybe, I was big during the 50s, and maybe they should take, these people started to take a look at me again and how things are viewed. He is trying to take us back to the 50s, but that's for that show, guys. And I hope you tune in because that is going to be, I'm going to quote words, put his words right on the screen and watch him talk about his hatred for or his love for slavery and stuff like that. But that's another show. But we're at this point right now where this Christian nationalist fascist ideology is now happening and it's taking over. We are 4 months away from the midterms. Donald Trump is plowing through norms, regulations. He's losing in court, but in the court of public opinion, our fear should be there is just enough support for him to move more troops into the streets, to rat on your neighbors, to say you're immigrants or you're others. We should all be very frightened of what's going to happen and what is happening right now. Because as I said in the start, they're shooting people in the streets. I don't care if it's 1, 5, or 1,000. This administration is about killing the others, getting them out of here. If they can't kill them, they will move you out to a black site somewhere. They will move you to another country. They will send you to a prison in Venezuela or in Colombia. But there's one last thing I want to alarm people about. There are prison camps all around the United States being put up. Some of them, to put a picture in your head that you probably should not have, are near railway stations where they have the ability to put people on train cars and move them into Florida, Texas, other conservative states. Remind your history. This is coming, guys. Who are they going to jail? Well, history tells us one thing. They start with the socialists and the communists because they're the easiest boogeyman. And it's a boogeyman for the far right to say, well, the liberals are coming to take all your money, your guns, and the Jews and these people and the coastal elites and all those people are coming for you. And they say, well, better them than me. And those targets happened under Hitler. The savages and the immigrants happening right now. The Haitians, the nasty Haitians, they're eating the cats and the dogs. They're not eating the freaking cats and dogs, you insane bastard. You just don't like them because they fought for their independence and won. Haiti is one of the only, if not, I think they are the only minority group to win their freedom and win their fight. Maybe stuck in the craw of some of those white nationalists. But they're going to do what they did in Rome. The savages, the immigrants, the non-Christian people who they need to conform to Christians or kill. They did it to the Native Americans here or the indigenous people. Then the LGBTQs. Gays are taking our family values away. They're looking to split up families. So are the African Americans, right? Let's get them too. So what are those train cars and prisons for? Well, there's a fight right now and a push to get rid of or to fight communism, just like the McCarthy era. That didn't work out too well. But those ideas about Antifa, pay attention because Antifa is strongly connected to the Democratic Party, the liberals, and the progressives, because they are Antifa. So when you designate Antifa to be a terrorist organization, are you not saying that the Democratic Party is a terrorist organization? Are you not saying that the Jews are part of the Democratic Party, which are part of the Antifa movement, which are part of the terrorist movement? Are you not saying the African Americans and the immigrants are part of Antifa, who are marching on the streets in protest and No Kings protests, are part of Antifa, are part of the Democratic Party, are part of the rebellion against fascists? So who's going to prison? Stay tuned, boys and girls, because this midterm is going to change what the United States looks like. They have no other way to go but forward unless we stop them. My message to you all is this: do not be apathetic. Do not sit back with thoughts and prayers. When they tell you to tone the rhetoric down, you turn the volume up. You go to protests. You write your congressmen, you write your senators and tell them there is a fascist movement in this country and I want to know what you are doing to stop it. And if they do not tell you what you want to hear, you protest. Because what I want to hear is that sitting senators and House Democrats are going up to Capitol Hill and letting Donald Trump know you don't want to do this, because if you do, we are going to secede from the Union. You're effectively saying we do not have representation. You are effectively marginalizing the Democratic Party and democracy itself. And if you do this, we are going to pull the plug. We fund a majority of your red poor states, the ones that are awfully run, the ones that you could care less about because they have poor people there. And yet you guys are living like fat cats while they're living in squalor. We need to be honest, brutally honest. When they ask about Graham, about Lindsey Graham, don't dispense this garbage about niceness. Tell them honestly, he is part of the reason we're here. He may have at some point been a good person, but that ended when Trump got into office. He railed against LGBTQs. He backed Donald Trump. He didn't back him before until he got into power. Now all of a sudden he was a coward. But we need to speak honestly about people. We need to tell them the Republican Party are being taken over by radical, right, Christian, white nationalists. This is your government, guys. They're at the top of the food chain. Stephen Miller is a racist piece of garbage and a Nazi. Pete Hegseth has a Jerusalem cross on his chest. Call it as you see him. Pete Hegseth is a racist piece of garbage who is a white nationalist who is going against Iran because it fits the narrative of hate for Muslims. Half of you don't even know any Muslims. Guarantee it. You're jumping on the bandwagon now. Listen, I'll see you in the next show. We'll talk about Christian nationalism in depth. I will go into Doug Wilson, the pastor that is most linked to Pete Hegseth and is in his ear about what this Christian nationalist movement means. I will then talk to you about Paula White, who is an evangelical Christian known as the New Apostolic Reformation that speaks in tongues and is the new form of televangelist that is getting a lot of money and is in the vein of Donald Trump, a con person. She has conned her way into the White House. It's going to be a killer show next time, guys, and we will talk all about the takeover of the Christianity and Christian movement in the United States. See you next time. Stay safe.